The snow came at them sideways, each flake a tiny blade cutting through the darkness. Elena's hands gripped the steering wheel, even though the engine had died 20 minutes ago, her knuckles white against skin, already turning blue. The heater had given out first, then the lights, then that final cough from under the hood that meant they weren't going anywhere. In the back seat, Iris shivered under every jacket they owned, her lips taking on a purple tint that made Elena's chest constrict. 9 years old, and already she'd seen too much. The eviction, the shelters that turned them away, 3 weeks sleeping in this car that now felt like a metal coffin. The temperature gauge on the dashboard read -18 before the battery died. Outside, Montana wilderness stretched in every direction, pine trees bending under the weight of ice. Elena fumbled for her phone. Dead. Of course it was dead. Everything was always dead or dying or about to give up. Mom. Iris's voice came out as barely a whisper, her breath forming clouds that dissipated too quickly in the cold. I can't feel my toes. The words landed like a punch. Elena had maybe 30 minutes before hypothermia became irreversible. She'd read about it once, how the body shut down from the extremities inward, how children went faster than adults, how people just fell asleep and never woke up. Out. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. We need to get out and walk. Walk where Elena didn't have an answer. She pushed the door open against wind that tried to slam it shut. Snow had already drifted halfway up the window. She pulled Iris from the back seat, wrapped her own coat around the girl's shoulders, even though it left Elena in just a thin sweater. They stumbled forward because staying still meant dying. The road, if it could still be called a road under 3 feet of fresh powder, curved through forest so thick the branches formed a tunnel overhead. Elena's grandmother Lily had talked about this area once years ago before the cancer took her. Something about a house on a hill. A place where she'd been born, a place Elena's mother had forbidden them from ever mentioning. Lily had been delirious near the end, mixing memories with morphine dreams, but she'd drawn a map on a napkin. Elena had kept it for reasons she couldn't explain. The napkin was in her pocket now, dissolving in the wet. 20 minutes of walking. Iris stopped responding to questions. Her weight became heavier against Elena's side. The wind carved through Elena's sweater like it wasn't there at all. Her own legs were going numb. This was it then. This was how they'd be found in spring, 2 frozen shapes that used to be a mother and daughter, another statistic about poverty and winter and bad decisions. Then she saw it. Through a gap in the trees, up a slope that should have been impossible to climb but somehow wasn't, a structure loomed against the white sky. Massive, stone, Gothic peaks and tall windows that reflected nothing. A mansion, though that word felt too alive for what stood before them. This was a monument to abandonment. Elena didn't remember making the decision to climb toward it. Her body moved on some instinct older than thought. Iris hung limp in her arms. The girl's breathing had gone shallow. 10 minutes, maybe less. The front entrance was sealed, heavy wooden doors chained with rust that looked decades old. Elena dragged Iris around the side boots, sinking into drifts that came up to her thighs. A window at ground level half buried the glass, long gone. She didn't think. Just kicked away snow and shoved Iris through the gap, then followed, tumbling into darkness that felt somehow colder than the blizzard outside. They'd landed in a basement. Stone walls wept with condensation frozen into sheets of ice. The air tasted stale, untouched, like breathing in a grave. Elena pulled Iris close, rubbing the girl's arms, her legs trying to generate any warmth. But the cold here was different, not the living cold of winter wind, but something dead, something that had been settling into these walls for years. Stairs, wooden creaking under weight they probably shouldn't still support. Elena carried Iris up into what must have been the main floor. Her eyes adjusted slowly. A grand entrance hall chandelier hanging by threads, marble floors cracked and heaving, furniture draped in sheets that had rotted to lace, everything covered in dust thick enough to show their footprints like tracks in ash. The temperature inside registered at maybe 10 degrees, marginally better than outside, but not enough. Not nearly enough. Iris wasn't shivering anymore, which meant her body had stopped trying to warm itself. Elena's own thoughts were starting to blur, hypothermia creeping into her brain, making everything slow and distant. A fireplace. Massive stone hearth in what looked like a living room. Elena laid Iris on the floor in front of it, then stumbled through the house looking for anything that would burn. Broken chairs, wooden picture frames, books so old they crumbled at her touch. She piled it all into the hearth hands, shaking so badly she dropped the lighter 3 times before getting a flame. The kindling caught. Small fire at first, barely more than candle-sized, but growing. Elena fed it carefully, watching Iris's face in the flickering light. The girl's eyes were closed. Her chest rose and fell in stuttering breaths. Please. Elena hadn't prayed in years, not since her mother died, but the word came out anyway. Please don't take her too. The fire grew. Heat began to radiate outward in small waves. Elena pulled Iris closer, close enough to feel warmth, but not close enough to burn. She rubbed the girl's hands. Her feet kept talking even when there was no response. "You're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. This is just temporary. Just until the storm passes. Then we'll figure out the next thing. We always figure out the next thing." The lies tasted like ash. Iris's eyes fluttered open sometime around midnight. The fire had stabilized, fed by what looked like 100-year-old mahogany that Elena had stripped from a collapsed bookshelf. The girl stared at the flames without speaking, her expression unreadable. "Where are we?" Elena didn't have a good answer. "Some old house. We're safe. We're warm. It's so quiet." It was. The kind of quiet that pressed against eardrums that made every small sound the pop of burning wood. Their breathing, the wind outside feel amplified and wrong. The house settled around them with groans that could have been structural or could have been something else. Elena told herself it was structural. They dozed in shifts, Elena waking every 20 minutes to feed the fire. The wood supply was finite. By dawn they'd need to find more or find a way to actually heat this place. She stood, joints protesting, and explored while Iris slept. The house was enormous. 12 bedrooms at least, each one a tomb of moth-eaten fabric and furniture that might have been valuable once. Bathrooms with fixtures crusted in mineral deposits, a kitchen where copper pans hung green with verdigris, a dining room with a table long enough to seat 20 place settings still arranged like the family had just stepped out for a moment 40 years ago. In what must have been a study, Elena found papers, yellowed documents most too faded to read, but one envelope tucked into a drawer looked newer, or less old. The paper crinkled under her fingers as she opened it. The handwriting inside was feminine, slanted, written in blue ink that had faded to gray. "To whoever finds this house, if you can feel its heartbeat, you belong here. K.W. 1984. Elena's hands started to shake again, but not from cold this time. That handwriting, she knew that handwriting. Had seen it in an old journal her grandmother Lily kept, the one Elena had found after Lily died. The one her mother had tried to burn, but Elena had saved. She was being ridiculous. Coincidence. Stress. Hypothermia scrambling her thoughts. But the feeling wouldn't leave her. This sense of déjà vu so strong it felt like memory. Like she'd been here before, or was supposed to have been here, or Mom Iris stood in the doorway looking more alert than she had hours ago. Her color had improved. They'd survived the night. "I found something." Elena's voice came out strange. "Come look at this fireplace." They walked back to the living room. In daylight filtering through grimy windows, Elena could see details she'd missed in the dark. The stonework around the hearth was intricate, carved with vines and flowers, and there at the base where the fire had warmed the stone enough to melt decades of grime, words appeared, carved directly into the rock. Rose plus Catherine, 1974. Iris traced the letters with one finger. Who are Rose and Catherine? I don't know. But Elena was lying. Rose was a name Lily had mentioned once in those final morphine days. Something about her mother, something about regret, something Elena had been too young and too angry to listen to properly. The fire was dying again. Elena needed to either find more wood or find a way to make the house's actual heating system work, if it even had one, if it could still function after what looked like decades of abandonment. Down in the basement she found the boiler, a massive cast-iron beast that probably dated back to the 1940s, all rivets and pressure gauges and pipes that snaked through the ceiling like metal vines. Elena had learned basic mechanics from Lily, who'd learned from her own father, who'd been a maintenance worker before times got hard. The knowledge was there, buried under years of other jobs and other survival skills, but it surfaced now as Elena studied the system. The gas line came in from outside. The main shutoff valve was crusted with rust but intact. The pilot light assembly looked ancient but not broken. The pressure gauge read 0, which meant the system had been drained and shut down properly, not just abandoned mid-operation. This could work. Might work. The thought felt dangerous, like hope, which was the most dangerous thing of all. She climbed back upstairs to find Iris kneeling in front of the fireplace holding something. A yellowed envelope singed at the edges from where it must have been tucked into the chimney itself. It fell out when I was looking for more wood to burn. Elena took it carefully. The envelope was addressed in that same handwriting, Mother. Nothing else. Just that single word. She opened it with fingers that trembled. The letter inside was dated March 15, 1984. Mother, I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. I'm pregnant and alone and I don't know what to do. I know you told me to never contact you again, but I'm begging you. Please, I'll do anything. I'll give up the baby if that's what you want. I just need to know you don't hate me. Please write back. Please. Your daughter, Catherine. Elena read it 3 times before the words made sense. Then she read it again because the sense they were making was impossible. Her grandmother Lily had been born in 1985, had never known her own father, had grown up with a mother, Catherine, who died of cancer when Lily was only 14. Elena had never met Catherine, had only seen one photograph, had only heard stories filtered through her mother's bitterness. But she'd seen Catherine's handwriting, in that journal. And it was this, exactly this. "Mom," Iris's voice came from somewhere far away. "What's wrong?" Elena's knees buckled. She sat down hard on the dusty floor, the letter still clutched in her hand. If this was real, if this Catherine was that Catherine, then this house, this place they'd stumbled into by accident or fate or desperation, was connected to her family in ways she couldn't begin to untangle. "I need to check something." The words came out mechanical. "Stay here, keep warm, I'll be right back." She found 12 more letters in the chimney, all addressed to Mother, all unanswered. They chronicled Catherine's pregnancy, her attempt to find work while showing her terror at becoming a parent alone. The last one in the chimney was dated November 1985. "Mother, I named her Lily, after your favorite flower. Maybe someday you'll want to meet her. I hope so. I'll keep hoping. Love, Catherine." Elena's breath caught. Lily, her grandmother, born November 1985. The timeline matched perfectly. But if Catherine had been writing to her mother from this house, then Catherine's mother must have lived here, must have owned this place. And if Catherine's mother was named Rose and Rose was carved into the fireplace with Catherine, then... The sound of a vehicle cut through her spiral of thoughts. Elena moved to a window, careful to stay hidden behind rotting curtains. A postal truck, government issue, pulling up the long drive she hadn't even known existed. A man got out, mid-50s, weathered face, USPS uniform. He walked toward the house with the casual confidence of someone who'd made this trip 1,000 times. Then he saw smoke coming from the chimney and stopped dead. Elena's mind raced through options. Hide, lie, run. But they had nowhere to run to, and lying had never been her strength, and hiding would only make things worse when he inevitably found them. She opened the front door before he could knock. He stared at her. She stared back. His face went through several expressions in quick succession: surprise, confusion, something that looked almost like recognition. When he spoke, his voice came out hoarse. "Catherine." The name hit Elena like a physical blow. "No. I'm Elena. Elena Hartley." "But you..." His eyes searched her face, cataloging details. "You look exactly like her. Catherine Whitmore. You could be her twin." Elena's mouth went dry. "You knew Catherine Whitmore knew her." The man's expression shifted to something sadder. "My father worked here for 30 years. Gardener for the Whitmore family. Catherine was... she was the kindest person I ever met." He paused, seemed to make a decision, then extended his hand. "Frank Calloway. I deliver mail to this road. Have for 15 years, even though nobody's lived here since 2004. Elena shook his hand numbly. "I'm sorry. We broke in. Our car died in the storm and we needed shelter. We'll leave as soon as." Frank held up a hand. "Don't apologize for surviving. But tell me, why do you look so much like Catherine Whitmore?" "Because I think..." Elena's voice cracked. "I think she was my grandmother." Frank went very still. "You're saying Catherine had a child? A daughter?" "Lily. She died 10 years ago. Cancer. The same thing that killed Catherine." Frank's face had gone pale. "Where was Lily born? I don't know. My mother never talked about it. Never talked about any of her family. I only found out my grandmother's name after my mom died, and I went through her things. Come with me." Frank turned and started walking toward the house without waiting for a response. "There's something you need to see." Elena hesitated, then followed. Iris appeared at the top of the stairs wrapped in a blanket they'd found. Frank stopped when he saw her, his expression doing that strange recognition thing again. "And she has Catherine's eyes." "How old is she?" "9. The same age Catherine was when..." He shook his head. "Never mind. Come on, both of you." He led them down to the basement, past the boiler, to a corner Elena hadn't explored yet. Behind a stack of old furniture, a door she'd missed in the dark. Frank pulled a key from his pocket, one that looked old and well used, and unlocked it. Inside was a storage room. Boxes, trunks, and on the shelves photograph albums preserved in plastic. Frank pulled one down and opened it to a page marked with a faded ribbon. The photograph showed a young woman, maybe 22 or 23, standing in front of this very house. Dark hair, strong features, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The caption underneath read, "Catherine Whitmore, 1983. Elena stared at the face that could have been her own reflection. This was taken a year before she disappeared. Frank's voice was quiet. "Rose Whitmore. Catherine's mother told everyone Catherine had died. But my father didn't believe it. He said Rose had driven Catherine away, disowned her for getting pregnant by someone Rose thought was beneath the family. Another photograph. Catherine clearly pregnant, sitting in a garden. The same garden Elena could see through the basement window, though now it was overgrown and buried in snow. That was the last picture my father took of her. Spring of 1984. Catherine asked him to document everything, said she wanted proof she'd existed in case Rose ever regretted what she'd done. What happened to Catherine? She left. No one saw her again. Rose told the town Catherine had died in an accident out west. Closed casket funeral. No body. My father went to every hospital, every shelter within 100 miles. Never found her. Frank closed the album gently. Until now I thought Catherine really was dead. She is dead. Elena's throat felt tight. She died in 1999. Breast cancer. Left behind a 14-year-old daughter. Lily. Frank repeated the name like a prayer. Catherine named her baby Lily, Rose's favorite flower. She still loved her mother even after everything. Did she ever try to find Catherine? Frank's expression hardened. Number Rose Whitmore lived in this house until 2004, died wealthy and alone. She told everyone she had no family. Willed everything to her son Preston, who's been trying to sell the property ever since. Elena felt something cold settle in her chest. Preston Whitmore. The name meant nothing to her, but it should have. This man was her great-uncle, her grandmother's brother. Does Preston know about Catherine? Frank's laugh had no humor in it. Preston was born in 1979, 5 years before Catherine left. He would have been 5 when she disappeared. Rose probably told him the same lie she told everyone else, and even if he knew the truth, I doubt he'd care. Preston Whitmore is a lawyer in Seattle, comes out here twice a year to complain about how hard it is to sell a property with clouded title and historical designation issues. What does that mean? It means Frank started to answer, then stopped. His eyes had gone to Iris, who was examining another photograph album. It means this house is complicated, legally, emotionally, every other way. And it means you two being here might complicate things even more. We'll go. Elena moved toward the stairs. As soon as the storm clears. Wait. Frank's voice stopped her. I didn't say you should go. I said it's complicated. But complications aren't always bad. He pulled out his phone, scrolled through contacts, made a call. Mrs. Whitmore. It's Frank Calloway. Yes, ma'am, from the post office. I'm at the estate. No, ma'am, there's no problem with the mail, but there is something, or rather someone here you need to meet. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. What are you doing? Something that should have happened 40 years ago. Frank's expression was set. Rose Whitmore doesn't live at the estate anymore. Hasn't since she went into assisted living 2 years ago. But she still owns the property, still makes the decisions. And she needs to see you. I don't understand. You look exactly like the daughter she spent 4 decades pretending was dead. Frank's voice was gentle but firm. Maybe seeing you will change something, or maybe it won't. But either way, you deserve to know who your family is. And Rose deserves to know she has a great-granddaughter. The storm had started to clear by the time Rose Whitmore's car pulled up. A Mercedes sedan, ancient but immaculate, driven by a woman who moved with the careful slowness of the very elderly. She emerged wrapped in a black coat that looked more expensive than everything Elena had ever owned combined. Frank met her at the door. Elena watched from a window, Iris pressed against her side. The old woman looked fragile, bird-boned white hair pulled back in a bun. But her face, even from a distance, even worn by age, held echoes of the woman in the photographs. Catherine's mother. Elena's great-grandmother. Rose saw the smoke from the chimney first. Her hand went to her throat, some involuntary gesture of shock or grief. Then Frank said something, and she looked toward the window where Elena stood. Their eyes met across 50 feet of snow-covered ground. Rose's knees buckled. Frank caught her, supported her weight, but the old woman's gaze never left Elena's face. Her mouth formed a word that Elena couldn't hear but could read on her lips: Catherine. Then Rose was moving faster than someone that old should be able to move, practically running toward the house. Frank called after her, but she didn't stop. The front door slammed open, and suddenly Rose was there in the entrance hall, staring at Elena with an expression of such raw, desperate hope that it was painful to witness. Catherine. The word came out as a sob. You came back. You came home. I'm not Catherine. Elena forced the words out. I'm Elena. Catherine was my grandmother. Rose's hope shattered visibly. The light went out of her eyes, replaced by something worse, the return of whatever grief she'd been carrying for 40 years. Of course you're not. Catherine would be older now. If she were still alive, she'd be. She died in 1999. Elena made her voice as gentle as possible. Breast cancer. She was 38. Rose's hands came up to cover her face. The sound that came from her throat wasn't quite crying, wasn't quite a scream. It was the sound of someone who'd been holding something in for so long that finally releasing it threatened to break them apart. Iris, brave beyond her years, walked over and took Rose's hand. "Don't cry. You didn't know. You couldn't have known." Rose looked down at the girl and something in her face shifted. Catherine's eyes. "You have Catherine's eyes." "I'm Iris. I'm 9. Catherine was 9 when Rose's voice broke again. "When I taught her to plant roses. The winter roses that bloom even in snow. She loved those roses, tended them every day. And then She couldn't finish. Didn't need to. The story was already written in every line of her face, every tremor in her hands. Frank had followed Rose inside. He stood in the doorway now, giving them space, but ready to intervene if needed. "Mrs. Whitmore, maybe you should sit down." Rose ignored him. Her focus was entirely on Elena. "You have her face, her hair, the same way she stood like she was ready to run at any moment." She paused, seemed to gather herself. "You said Catherine was your grandmother, so she had a child, a daughter. Lily." Elena pulled out the letter she'd found in the chimney. "Catherine wrote about her, about how she named her after your favorite flower." Rose took the letter with shaking hands. "Read it once, then again, then a third time." When she looked up, tears were streaming down her face unchecked. She was pregnant. She was alone and pregnant and begging me to respond. And I never answered. I threw every letter away. I told myself she deserved to suffer, that she'd made her choice and had to live with it. You didn't know she was going to die. No, but I knew she was suffering. I knew she needed her mother. And Rose's voice turned bitter self-loathing. I chose pride over love. I chose what the town might think over my own daughter. And Catherine died, believing I hated her. She didn't. Elena surprised herself with the certainty. My grandmother Lily told me her mother loved her completely, sacrificed everything for her. Catherine might have been hurt by what you did, but she understood love. She knew how to give it. That means someone must have taught her. Rose's sob came from somewhere deep. That's generous. But Catherine learned love despite me, not because of me. Frank cleared his throat. "Mrs. Whitmore, there's more you should know. Preston is scheduled to sign the final papers next week. The sale to Ashford Development goes through on the 15th. Rose's head snapped up. "What?" "The estate. Preston has power of attorney. He's been telling you it's taking longer than expected because of title issues, but the truth is, he's had a buyer lined up for 6 months. Victoria Ashford. She's planning to demolish the house and build a luxury resort. This is Catherine's house." Rose's voice went sharp, angry in a way it hadn't been moments before. "This is where she learned to walk. Where she planted her first rose bush. Where we were happy before I ruined everything. Preston doesn't see it that way. He sees property value and development potential. Then I'll tell him no. I'll revoke the power of attorney." Frank exchanged a glance with Elena. "Mrs. Whitmore, he filed a competency motion last year. Got 2 doctors to say you were suffering from dementia. The court gave him authority over your assets." Rose swayed on her feet. Elena caught her elbow, guided her to a chair that looked dubious but held. The old woman's face had gone ashen. "Dementia. Of course he did. A few memory lapses and suddenly I'm incompetent. Never mind that I can still balance my checkbook and remember every cruel word I ever said to my daughter." "Is there anything we can do?" Elena heard herself asking. Even though this wasn't her fight, wasn't her problem, wasn't anything to do with her at all. Except it was. This house had sheltered them when they were dying. And somewhere in its walls were more letters, more pieces of Catherine's story, more of the grandmother Elena had never known. Rose looked at her with eyes that had gone hard. "We find every letter Catherine hid. We document her life. We prove that this house is a historical site connected to my daughter. And then we use that to block the sale until I can fight Preston in court. That could take months. Then we have months." Rose's voice gained strength. "You said you found letters in the chimney. There are more. Catherine told me once, this was years before everything fell apart, that if she ever had secrets to keep, she'd hide them in the walls, in the bones of the house." How many letters Catherine wrote me twice a week for 16 years. Rose's math was quick automatic. That's over 1,600 letters. Most I threw away without reading, but she would have kept copies. She was meticulous like that. Every letter would be documented, dated, preserved somewhere in this house. Iris had been listening quietly. She spoke now, her voice small but clear. "We can help. We're good at finding things." Rose studied her, really looked at her for the first time. "You're Catherine's great-granddaughter. That makes you my great-great-granddaughter. Family." The word hung in the air between them, weighted with decades of absence and damage. "I have no family." Elena's response came automatically defensive. "My mother made sure of that. Cut ties with everyone before I was born. Died without ever telling me why. Maybe she was protecting you from me." Rose's smile was sad. Maybe she knew what kind of woman would drive away her own daughter. What kind of grandmother would refuse to know her granddaughter existed? Or maybe Elena stopped herself. She had theories about her mother, about the anger and bitterness that had poisoned her childhood, but they didn't matter now. What matters is finding those letters. Over the next 4 days they searched. Elena and Iris Frank when he wasn't working his route, even Rose when her health allowed it. They pulled up floorboards and examined walls for hollow spaces. They climbed into the attic where insulation had compressed into useless mats and rafters showed rot. They descended into the basement's deepest corners where the stone walls wept and strange growths bloomed in the dark. The letters appeared in impossible places. Folded into the space between double walls, pressed flat under layers of wallpaper, sealed in glass jars buried in the garden's frozen earth. Each one was dated, addressed to Mother, signed Catherine. Each one was another piece of a life Elena had never known existed. Catherine wrote about Lily's first steps, her first words, the way she laughed at birds, her fear of thunder, her love of stories. She wrote about working 3 jobs to keep them fed, about the small apartment that leaked when it rained, about teaching Lily to read using books from the free library. She wrote about cancer, about finding the lump, about the biopsy results, about treatment she couldn't afford and prognosis she couldn't accept, about the terror of leaving Lily alone. And she wrote about forgiveness, again and again in letter after letter. "Mother, I forgive you. Mother, I understand. Mother, I love you. Mother, please write back." Rose read each one with shaking hands, wept over some, pressed others to her chest like they could fill the 40-year hole in her heart. She aged visibly over those 4 days, as if finally letting grief touch her was allowing time to catch up. On the afternoon of the 4th day, Preston arrived. The Mercedes that pulled up was newer than Rose's, black and aggressive where hers had been elegant. The man who emerged wore a suit that probably cost more than Elena's car had been worth. 50s, graying at the temples, carrying himself with the entitled confidence of someone who'd never been told no. He saw the smoke from the chimney. His face went through several emotions, settling on cold anger. When he walked inside, he didn't knock. "Mother." His voice could have frozen water. "What is this?" Rose stood in the entrance hall, letters clutched in her hands. "This is my house, Preston. I can invite who I want." Preston's eyes swept over Elena, dismissing her, then landed on Iris with barely concealed irritation. "You can't have squatters here. The sale closes December 15th. Victoria Ashford's team needs access for final inspections. There won't be a sale." Rose's voice didn't waver. "I'm revoking your power of attorney. You can't do that." Preston's tone shifted to something between condescension and concern, the voice of someone talking to a child or an invalid. "Dr. Morrison certified you're not competent to make these decisions. Dr. Morrison wrote whatever you paid him to write. I'm lucid, I'm aware. And I'm telling you this house is not for sale." Preston's jaw tightened. "You're being emotional. You haven't lived here in 2 years. You can't maintain it. It's literally falling apart. The most merciful thing is to let it go." "Merciful to whom? To you and your 40% commission," Rose's anger was building. "Or to Victoria Ashford, who wants to erase this house and everything it represents?" "It represents nothing." Preston's voice went cold. "It's a building. Bricks and wood. It doesn't have a soul, Mother. It's not sacred. It's just old. Your sister thought it was sacred." Rose held up the letters. "Catherine poured her heart into these walls. She left her story here because she knew I'd never let anyone destroy it. And she was right. I won't." Preston's expression flickered surprise, then calculation, then that cold mask again. "Catherine is dead. She's been dead for 25 years. Whatever she wanted doesn't matter anymore. She died in 1999. Elena spoke for the first time. "Cancer, stage 4, alone in a charity hospital in Oregon. Her daughter Lily was 14. I know because Lily was my mother, which makes Catherine my grandmother, which makes you my— What would that be?" Great Uncle Preston stared at her, looked at Iris, back to Rose. His face went through several transformations before settling on denial. "That's impossible. Catherine didn't have children. She had a daughter 9 months after you drove her away." Rose's voice cut like a blade. "Named her Lily. Raised her in poverty while you and I lived in this house. And Lily had Elena. And Elena has Iris. 3 generations you never knew existed because I was too proud and too cruel to answer my daughter's letters. You can't prove any of this. I can prove all of it." Rose gestured to the letters spread across the table. Birth certificates, hospital records, photographs. Catherine documented everything. She knew someday the truth would matter. Preston's hands clenched into fists. Even if this is true, even if Catherine did have descendants, they have no legal claim to this property. You willed it to me. The sale is contracted. I'm giving you 3 days to clear these people out, or I'm calling the sheriff. 3 days. Elena filed the number away. They had 72 hours before everything got worse. Preston left without another word, his Mercedes spraying snow as he accelerated down the drive. The silence that followed felt heavy. Iris broke it first. What secret was Gran Rose talking about? Rose sank into a chair, suddenly looking every one of her 78 years. Catherine found documents proving my father, your great-great-grandfather, obtained most of our land through fraudulent means. Forged deeds, bribed officials, displaced families who had nowhere else to go. She wanted to return it all, make restitution. I told her she was being naive, that business was business, that the past was past. And now? Now I think Catherine was right. Rose looked at the letters scattered around them. She was right about everything. About love mattering more than money. About truth mattering more than reputation. I just wish I'd listened before she died. Elena picked up one of the letters dated April 1995. This one was longer than most, running to 3 pages. She read it silently. First, then aloud. Mother Lily asked me today why she doesn't have a grandmother like other kids. I told her you loved her but couldn't be with us. It's the kindest lie I know. But someday she'll ask harder questions. She'll want to know why her mother lived in poverty while her grandmother lived in a mansion. She'll want to know what I did that was so terrible it deserved exile. And I won't have good answers. Because falling in love wasn't a crime. Having a baby wasn't a sin. I made choices you disagreed with, and you made me pay for them with decades of silence. But I will always choose to believe that love survives even the longest silence. With hope, always, Catherine. Rose's tears fell silently onto the letter she held. I didn't deserve her hope. Don't deserve yours either. You have it anyway. Elena surprised herself with the truth of it. I spent years angry at my mother for cutting us off from family, angry at Lily for dying without explaining. Now I understand they were protecting me from exactly this, from being hurt by people who choose pride over love. But maybe we can be different. Maybe we can be the generation that breaks the pattern. Iris had found another letter, this one tucked behind a loose brick in the fireplace. Mom, this one's different. It's not addressed to Rose. Elena took it carefully. The envelope read, To my granddaughter, if she exists. Dated December 1998, 2 months before Catherine died. Inside, the handwriting was shakier than in earlier letters, the paper marked with water stains that could have been tears or coffee or both. To my granddaughter, I don't know your name. Don't know if Lily will have children. Don't know if she'll ever tell them about me. But if you exist, and if you somehow find this house, then you need to know this. You come from love. Your grandmother Lily was loved with every fiber of my being. I may have failed at many things, but I never failed at loving her. And she will love you the same way. We are women who love fiercely and ask for nothing but acknowledgement in return. Don't let anyone convince you that's weakness. It's the strongest thing we do. The house knows this. I've poured 40 years of love into its walls. Every letter I wrote and hid here is proof that hope can survive even the longest silence. If you're reading this, then you're home. You were always meant to find your way here. With all my love, Catherine Whitmore. Elena read it twice before her vision blurred with tears. Iris leaned against her side. That's you, Mom. You're the granddaughter. I know. Elena's voice came out rough. I know. Frank had been quiet through all of this. He spoke now, practical and grounding. We need a plan. Preston gave you 3 days. But the sale closing is December 15th. That's 12 days from now. We need to either stop the sale or prove Rose has grounds to revoke Preston's authority before then. What do we need to do? Elena wiped her eyes. Find as many letters as possible. Document everything. Photograph the hiding places. Create a record that proves Catherine lived here, loved here, left her legacy here. Then we file for emergency guardianship review and historical designation. Get the press involved. Make it politically impossible for a judge to side with Preston. Rose nodded. I still have friends at the Historical Society. They'll help. And I know a lawyer who specializes in property rights and trust law. Frank pulled out his phone. She's been wanting to take on the Ashford Development Corporation for years. This might be her chance. So we have 3 days before Preston tries to force us out and 12 days before the sale closes. Iris said it matter-of-factly, like she was discussing weekend plans. 3 days to gather evidence. 12 days to save a house, a legacy, and maybe a family. Rose reached out, took Elena's hand in one of hers, and Iris's in the other. 3 days to do what should have been done 40 years ago. They worked through what remained of the day and into the night, finding letters and photographing locations. By the time exhaustion forced them to stop, they'd documented 127. Each one told part of Catherine's story. Each one was another nail in Preston's plans. It was Iris who found number 127 in a place no one had thought to look, inside a locked box hidden behind a false panel in the library. The key had been tucked into the binding of a book titled The Language of Flowers. The box itself was metal fireproof, sealed with wax that cracked when Iris pried it open. Inside were 53 pages stapled together, dated June 15, 1995. Not a letter. A document. Elena read the title, and her blood went cold. A complete accounting of Whitmore land acquisitions, 1920 to 1945, with evidence of fraud. Catherine had documented everything. Every forged deed, every bribed official, every displaced family. Names, dates, property descriptions, copies of original documents compared with the fraudulent ones filed at the county. Evidence that would destroy the Whitmore reputation and probably trigger criminal investigations even 70 years later. At the bottom, in Catherine's handwriting, "This is why Mother sent me away. Not because I fell in love, not because I got pregnant, because I found this and wanted to make it right, because I believed justice mattered more than money." She chose silence. "I choose truth. To whoever finds this, use it wisely. Use it well. Make right what my family made wrong." Elena looked up to find Rose and Frank reading over her shoulders. The old woman's face had gone ashen. "This is what you were talking about." Elena's voice was quiet. "This is the secret. This is why Preston wants to demolish the house." Rose's hands trembled. "He found Catherine's notes years ago. Must have. Knew she'd hidden the full evidence somewhere. If this comes out, every land deal the Whitmores ever made will be investigated. Families could sue for restitution. The fortune, what's left of it, could be claimed by the people it was stolen from." Frank was already photographing each page. "Then we use it. We contact every family listed here. We tell them what happened. We give them the chance to reclaim what's theirs. That will destroy us." Rose said it flatly, accepting. "The Whitmore name will be mud." "The Whitmore name is already mud." Elena surprised herself with the vehemence. "It's built on theft and silenced by cruelty. Catherine tried to fix it and you drove her away. Now we have a chance to do what she wanted, to choose truth over comfort, even if it costs us everything. We don't have anything to lose." Elena gestured around the decaying mansion. "I'm homeless. Iris and I were dying in a snowstorm before we found this place. You're estranged from your only living child. This house is falling apart. What exactly are we protecting by staying silent?" Rose was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Decision made. Contact the families. Tell them everything. Catherine wanted justice. She'll have it even if it's 40 years too late." The sun was rising when they finished photographing the document. Outside, fresh snow had started falling, gentle and quiet. Inside, the house felt different. Warmer somehow, even though the furnace still only worked sporadically. As if it knew finally that its secrets were being honored instead of buried. Iris had fallen asleep on the couch wrapped in blankets they'd found in an upstairs closet. Frank was making coffee in the kitchen using a camping stove they'd retrieved from his truck. Rose sat at the dining table, surrounded by letters, reading each one with the focus of someone trying to memorize every word. Elena stood at the window watching dawn break over the Montana wilderness. Somewhere out there, Preston was planning his counterattack. Somewhere out there, 53 families were about to learn their land had been stolen and there might be a path to restitution. Somewhere out there, her grandmother Catherine's ghost could rest, knowing her truth had finally been told. The house creaked around her. Just the wind, probably. Just old wood settling, but it sounded almost like approval. They'd found 127 letters in 5 days. Over the next 3 days, working frantically before Preston's deadline, they found 51 more, bringing the total to 178. 22 remained hidden somewhere in the house's vast structure, but time had run out. The next morning brought reporters. Frank had made calls through the night, local papers, regional stations, anyone who might care about a historical mansion with a buried scandal. By 10 a.m., 3 television crews had set up on the snow-covered lawn, their cameras capturing B-roll of the estate, while producers barked questions about timelines and exclusivity. Elena stood on the front steps, still wearing the same clothes she'd slept in, and told Catherine's story to a dozen strangers with microphones. She held up letter number 43, the one where Catherine described working the night shift at a diner, while Lily slept in the break room because childcare cost more than Catherine made in a week. She showed them letter 78, where Catherine detailed finding the land fraud documents and begging Rose to make restitution. A young reporter from Billings leaned forward, camera rolling. "You're saying the Whitmore family fortune was built on stolen land? I'm saying my grandmother documented 53 cases of fraudulent land acquisition between 1920 and 1945. Families who lost their homes, their livelihoods, their futures. Catherine tried to return what was taken. She was driven away for it. And Rose Whitmore knew Rose Whitmore is the one who told me to go public. Elena's voice stayed level. She spent 40 years regretting her choices. Now she wants to make them right. Inside, Rose sat at the dining table surrounded by letters she'd been arranging chronologically. Her hands moved with mechanical precision, organizing the evidence of her daughter's exile. Iris sat beside her quiet and watchful, occasionally handing Rose a tissue when the old woman's composure cracked. Frank had spread the land fraud document across the library floor, photographing each page from multiple angles. His methodical nature showed in how he labeled each shot, cross-referenced property descriptions with current county records, built an airtight case that even the best lawyers would struggle to dismantle. Preston's lawyers arrived at 2 p.m. 3 of them expensive suits and leather briefcases, flanked by a woman Elena recognized from television ads, Victoria Ashford herself. Mid-40s, blonde hair pulled back severely, smile that never reached her eyes. She surveyed the chaos of reporters and camera crews with visible irritation. The lead attorney handed Elena an envelope. Cease and desist. You are to stop making defamatory statements about the Whitmore family immediately. Any further public comment will result in legal action for slander, libel, and tortious interference with contractual relations. Elena opened the envelope, scanned the legalese, then handed it to Frank. He read it and laughed, the sound bitter. They're threatening to sue for telling the truth. That's rich. We have documentation. Victoria's voice could have cut glass. Preston Whitmore holds power of attorney for Rose Whitmore, who has been medically certified as incompetent to manage her affairs. The sale of this property was approved by a court-appointed guardian ad litem. Everything has been done legally and properly, except for the part where you're trying to demolish a house containing evidence of crimes. Frank didn't back down. And except for the competency evaluation being fraudulent. Victoria's expression flickered surprise calculation. Then that smooth mask again. I have no idea what you're talking about. Convenient. Frank pulled out his phone, reading from the screen. Dr. Gerald Morrison, the doctor who evaluated Rose, lost his license to practice in Montana in 2020. Disciplinary action for accepting payments to falsify mental competency evaluations. Funny that Preston Whitmore's lawyer managed to find the one doctor in the state willing to commit fraud for money. The silence that followed felt volcanic. Victoria's lawyers exchanged glances. Preston, who'd been standing back letting his attorneys do the talking, had gone white. Rose's expression transformed from grief to fury in the span of a heartbeat. You paid someone to declare me incompetent. Her voice shook. Your own mother. I did what was necessary to protect our assets from your sentimental attachment to a worthless property. Preston's mask was slipping, revealing something cold underneath. This house has been a drain on resources for 20 years. The responsible thing was to sell it before it collapsed entirely. The responsible thing was to honor your sister's memory. Rose moved closer, and despite her age and frailty, Preston stepped back. Catherine loved this house. Died believing someday I'd read her letters and understand what I'd lost. And you knew she existed, knew where she was, and you let her die alone. I never. Preston stopped himself, but it was too late. You never. What Rose's eyes were sharp, never knew she was alive, never had a chance to help her. Frank, show them what else we found. Frank produced a photocopy. A letter different from the others. Dated April 1998, addressed to Preston Whitmore, Seattle, Washington. Dear Preston, I don't have much time left. The doctors say weeks, maybe a month. Before I die, I need to know if there's any chance Mother would see me. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want to say goodbye. You're my only connection to her. Please, if you ever loved your sister, help me. Catherine. Below that, a response in different handwriting. Catherine, I remember you. Of course I'll help. I'll talk to Mother, explain everything. She'll understand. Give me a week. Love, Preston. And then nothing. Frank laid out another document. Hospital records from Sacred Heart Medical Center, Portland, Oregon. Catherine Whitmore, deceased May 15, 1999. Next of kin notification, attempted, no response. You told her you'd help. Rose's voice had gone deadly quiet. She died waiting for you to keep your promise. Preston's composure shattered completely. I was going to help. I meant to. But then I looked at what it would cost, the inheritance split 3 ways instead of 2, the questions about why Catherine had been exiled, the scandal, if her documents about the land fraud came out. And I decided it was easier to do nothing. Easier. The word hung in the air like an accusation. You let your sister die alone because it was easier. She was already dying. Preston's voice took on a defensive edge. I couldn't have saved her. The cancer was too advanced. You could have given her peace. You could have reconnected her with her mother. You could have told her that her daughter Lily would be welcomed into this family. Instead, you chose money over mercy, and Catherine died thinking no one loved her. That's not... Preston looked around at the cameras still rolling outside at his lawyers, who were trying to become invisible at Victoria, whose expression had gone carefully neutral. This is a private family matter. Not anymore. Rose turned to the reporters visible through the windows. She raised her voice. My son, Preston Whitmore, allowed his sister to die alone and afraid because he didn't want to share an inheritance. He hid her existence from me for 26 years. He's now trying to destroy the house where she hid 200 letters documenting her love for a family that abandoned her. If anyone wants to know why Ashford Development is so eager to demolish this property before historical review can occur, that's your answer. The feeding frenzy that followed was immediate and merciless. Reporters shouting questions, cameras pivoting to capture Preston's face, Victoria Ashford backing toward her car while her PR person fielded calls, the lawyers attempting damage control while their client stood frozen under the weight of his exposed betrayal. Frank ushered Rose, Elena, and Iris back inside, shutting the door on the chaos. Through the windows, they could see Preston getting into his car, Victoria's team in rapid retreat, the media circus shifting from curious interest to full scandal mode. Well, Rose sank into a chair, suddenly looking every one of her 78 years. That's done then. Is it enough? Elena wasn't sure what victory looked like here. Will it stop the sale? It'll slow it down. Frank was already checking his phone, reading messages from the lawyer he'd contacted. Public pressure might force the court to review Preston's power of attorney. But Victoria has resources and connections. She won't give up easily. Then we keep looking for letters. Iris spoke with the certainty of a child who'd decided how the story should end. Grand Catherine hid 200. We've only found 178. There's 22 more somewhere. They searched with renewed urgency, knowing time was compressing around them. In the library, Elena discovered a loose panel behind a portrait of Rose's father, the man whose fraud Catherine had documented. The panel concealed a hollow space, and within that space, nothing. The hiding place was empty. Over the following days, the story spread. Frank brought contact information for descendants of the 52 families listed in Catherine's fraud documentation, families whose land had been stolen generations ago. Using public records and ancestry websites, he tracked down people whose grandparents or great-grandparents had lost property to Whitmore schemes. By the third day, they had confirmation that 15 families were prepared to file claims. By the fifth day, that number had grown to 37. The scandal was spreading through networks of rural communities that had long memories and longer grudges. Victoria Ashford must have been monitoring the situation. She called Rose directly at 6 a.m. on the sixth day, her voice tight with barely controlled fury. You're making a mistake. This scandal will destroy more than just Preston. It'll hurt people who had nothing to do with what happened 80 years ago. Those people built their lives on stolen land. Rose's voice was steel. My granddaughter tried to make it right. I stopped her. Now I'm finishing what Catherine started. The lawsuits will drag on for years. Property values will collapse. Montana's entire historical land registry could be called into question. Then maybe it should be questioned. Maybe my father wasn't the only one who thought fraud was acceptable business practice. Maybe there are other families sitting on property they obtained through lies. If exposing the truth causes chaos, that's the price of justice deferred too long. Victoria's laugh was sharp. Justice. You want justice? I'll give you justice. I'm calling every bank that holds mortgages on properties connected to Whitmore land deals. I'm asking them to review the validity of their collateral. I'm suggesting that homes built on fraudulent deeds might need to be foreclosed and returned to rightful owners. Congratulations, Rose. You're about to make hundreds of families homeless. The line went dead. Rose set the phone down with shaking hands. Elena had heard enough of the conversation to understand the threat. She means it. Frank's expression was grim. Victoria Ashford didn't build a development empire by playing nice. If she can't have this property, she'll burn down everyone else's to punish you. Then we move faster. Elena was already pulling out the contact information for the lawyer Frank had recommended. We file for historical designation today. Get the house protected before Victoria can act. Historical designation takes months. Frank shook his head. The sale closes in 6 days. We don't have months, so we give her what she wants. Iris spoke quietly from the corner where she'd been reading Catherine's diary. We let her have the land. Everyone turned to stare. The girl looked up, her expression serious beyond her years. Grand Catherine's letter says, the house has 50 acres, but the estate is 300 acres. What if we give Victoria the land for her resort, but keep the house and 50 acres around it as a historical site? She gets her development. The families get their justice. The house stays protected. That might actually work. Frank was already pulling up zoning maps on his laptop. If we can get Rose to subdivide the property, we keep what matters and give Victoria enough to make her development viable. She won't like it, but it's better than a years-long legal battle. Rose looked at the letters spread across the table at the evidence that would reshape Montana's understanding of its own history. She looked at Elena and Iris, the family she'd never known she had. Then she nodded. Make the calls. By noon they had a proposal drafted. 250 acres for resort development, 50 acres around the house preserved as the Catherine Whitmore Historical Site. Victoria would get her project. The defrauded families would get financial compensation from the resort's future profits. The house would stand as testament to what had been lost and found again. Victoria's response came 3 hours later. Not enough. I want full rights to all 300 acres. The house can be relocated to a different property if historical preservation is so important. Relocating destroys the context. The lawyer, Patricia Hammond, a woman in her 60s who'd been fighting property developers since the Reagan administration, spoke with the patience of someone explaining basic concepts to a stubborn child. Catherine's letters reference specific locations in the house. The hiding places have historical significance. Moving the structure would make it meaningless. Then tear it down for all I care. Victoria's voice came through the speakerphone with crystalline clarity. I have a contract. I have court approval. I have every legal right to do whatever I want with this property once the sale closes. You also have a PR nightmare brewing. Patricia's smile was sharp even through audio. Half of Montana now knows the Ashford Corporation is trying to destroy evidence of historical land fraud to build a luxury resort on stolen land. How's that playing with your investors? The silence stretched long enough that Elena thought Victoria had hung up. Then I want the fraud documents sealed, never made public. In exchange, I'll accept the subdivision deal. Absolutely not. Rose's voice cut through before anyone else could respond. Catherine died to make sure that evidence would be revealed. I'm not hiding it again just to save your reputation. Then we have nothing to discuss. Victoria ended the call. Patricia leaned back in her chair, studying the ceiling. She'll come back. This story is getting national attention. Every reporter in this country loves a good David versus Goliath narrative. Victoria needs this to go away more than she needs 300 acres in Montana. How long until she breaks? Hard to say. Patricia checked her notes. The court hearing on Preston's power of attorney is scheduled for tomorrow morning. If the judge revokes it, Victoria's contract becomes invalid regardless of what she wants. That's our real deadline. The hearing was set for 9 a.m. They spent the evening preparing organizing evidence, rehearsing testimony. Rose's hands shook as she practiced explaining how Preston had manipulated her into signing initial documents, how the diagnosis of dementia had been falsified, how she'd been denied the chance to make her own decisions about property that held her daughter's memory. Iris fell asleep at the dining table, head pillowed on her arms, Catherine's diary open beside her. Elena carried her daughter upstairs to one of the bedrooms they'd cleared out, tucking blankets around the girl's small form. Through the window, stars pierced the winter sky with cold precision. This could all be over tomorrow. Frank had followed her upstairs, his voice quiet. If the judge sides with Preston, Victoria gets the house and everything in it, then we'll have done what we could. Elena meant it. For the first time in years, she'd been part of something larger than survival, had helped tell a story that deserved telling, had connected with family she hadn't known existed. Whatever happened tomorrow, that couldn't be taken away. They slept in shifts, rotating watch duty in case Preston or Victoria decided to take more direct action. The house creaked and settled around them, old wood responding to temperature shifts, pipes adjusting to intermittent water flow. Normal sounds, Elena told herself. Just a building being a building. At 3 a.m. she smelled smoke, not the clean smell of fireplace wood, but something chemical, accelerant, sharp. She was moving before conscious thought engaged, running down the hallway toward the source. The basement stairs glowed orange from below. Flames were crawling up the wooden steps, spreading faster than any natural fire. Iris, Rose, Frank, get out! Her voice came out as a scream. Fire! Get out now! Chaos erupted. Iris stumbling from her bedroom, eyes wide with terror. Frank helping Rose down the main stairs, the old woman moving with agonizing slowness. Elena ran through the first floor, grabbing letters, the diary, anything she could carry. Smoke was filling the rooms now, thick and black, burning her lungs. The metal box. The evidence. She'd left it in the library, too heavy to move quickly, but too important to abandon. She ran back, choking on smoke, found the box and tried to lift it. Too heavy. Way too heavy. She dragged it instead, metal scraping across wood floors, her muscles screaming. The front door was 20 feet away. Then 15. Then 10. The smoke was so thick she couldn't see, couldn't breathe, couldn't tell up from down. She felt the doorframe through touch more than sight, pulled the box through, collapsed on the snow-covered lawn, gasping for air that felt like broken glass going down. Iris ran to her, sobbing. Frank had Rose in his truck, the engine running, heat blasting. Sirens were approaching, too slow, always too slow. The house blazed behind them, flames punching through windows, roof beginning to sag. The letters. Elena's voice came out as a rasp. How many did we save? Frank's expression was answer enough. They'd saved what they'd carried, maybe 30 letters. The diary, the evidence box. Everything else, the 148 letters still hidden in walls, the photographs, the careful organization of Catherine's life was burning. Someone poured gasoline in the basement. Frank's jaw was tight with fury. Professional job. Knew exactly where to start it for maximum spread. Preston. Rose's voice was hollow. Or Victoria. Or both. Does it matter? Elena watched flames consume the place that had sheltered her daughter, held her family's history, kept secrets safe for 40 years. They won. They destroyed the evidence. No. Iris pulled away from Elena, staring at the burning house. They destroyed the building. The evidence is right there. She pointed at the metal box Elena had dragged through the fire. At Frank's truck, where he'd loaded supplies 2 days ago, including boxes of photocopies he'd made of every document they'd found. At Patricia Hammond's car, pulling up now, the lawyer having driven through the night when Frank called her, bringing her own copies of everything they'd sent her electronically. The house might burn. But Catherine's truth had already escaped its walls. It existed now in dozens of places, on hard drives and paper, in reporters' notebooks and historians' files. Destroying the building wouldn't silence her anymore. Fire trucks arrived, crews attacked the blaze with water that turned to steam on contact with heat-stressed stone. Too late to save the structure, but they kept it from spreading to the forest, from taking more than it had already claimed. By dawn, the Whitmore estate was a smoking shell. The roof had collapsed completely. The interior was gutted. The stone walls remained blackened and cracked, standing like a skeleton of what had been. Rose sat in Frank's truck, staring at the ruins. Her expression was unreadable. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady. Catherine always said the house was just a container for what mattered, that the important part wasn't the walls, but what happened inside them. Now everyone will know what happened here. What my daughter tried to do. What my father did. What I failed to do until it was too late. There were people gathering. Not reporters this time, though several camera crews had arrived to document the destruction. These were others. Families whose names appeared in Catherine's documents. People who'd driven through the night when they heard about the fire. Men and women carrying their own evidence letters. Catherine had sent them copies of documents she'd given their parents and grandparents, stories passed down about the woman who'd tried to make things right. Sarah Bishop, 85 years old, supported by a walker, and sheer determination, approached Rose with a manila envelope. My grandfather lost his farm in 1935. 300 acres taken through forged documents. We've been poor ever since. But Catherine Whitmore sent my mother this letter in 1984, telling her the truth and promising to fix it someday. I've kept it for 40 years. Now seems like the right time to share it. One by one they came forward. 30 people, then 50, then 70, each one carrying a piece of Catherine's attempt to make restitution. Letters, photocopies, oral histories that corroborated the written evidence. By the time the sun fully rose, they had recovered more documentation than Catherine had hidden in the house, because she'd sent copies everywhere, ensuring no single fire could erase what she'd fought to expose. Victoria Ashford arrived at 8 a.m. Her perfect composure was cracking around the edges. She surveyed the crowd, the media presence, the undeniable weight of community solidarity. Then she looked at Patricia Hammond, the subdivision deal. I'll take it, 250 acres. The house site stays protected. And we set up a compensation fund from resort profits for the families Catherine identified, but I want this settled today. Patricia's smile was cold. We'll need the contract in writing within 2 hours, and you'll publicly state that Ashford Development had nothing to do with this fire. Of course we didn't. Victoria's indignation sounded almost genuine. Why would we burn down a property we're about to own? You don't own it yet. Frank's voice was quiet, but it carried. An arson investigation will determine the cause. If it traces back to you or Preston, that contract won't be worth the paper it's printed on. Preston. Victoria's expression flickered. Preston Whitmore no longer represents this project. I've terminated our agreement. Whatever he did or didn't do is between him and the authorities. The hearing was at 9. They went anyway, driving through town in a convoy of trucks and cars, the burned metal evidence box riding in the back of Frank's vehicle. The courthouse steps were lined with cameras. Inside, every seat was filled. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Margaret Foster, surveyed the packed courtroom with the weary expression of someone who knew this was going to be complicated. She reviewed the preliminary motions in silence, her face giving nothing away. Preston sat at the defendant's table, his lawyers flanking him like bodyguards. He wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. Judge Foster spoke first to Rose Mrs. Whitmore. "I have here a medical evaluation from Dr. Gerald Morrison stating that you suffer from advanced dementia and are incapable of managing your affairs. Do you contest this?" Rose stood with Iris's help. "I contest it completely, Your Honor. Dr. Morrison lost his medical license in 2020 for falsifying mental competency evaluations. My son paid him to declare me incompetent so he could sell property I explicitly told him not to sell." The judge's eyebrows rose fractionally. "You're aware that's a serious accusation?" "I have documentation." Frank brought forward the files they'd prepared, Dr. Morrison's disciplinary records, bank transfers from Preston to Morrison's account, Rose's own medical records from legitimate doctors showing no signs of cognitive decline. Judge Foster reviewed each page with the careful attention of someone who knew careers could end based on what happened in the next hour. Then she looked at Preston. "Mr. Whitmore, do you have a response to these allegations?" Preston's lead lawyer stood. "Your Honor, our position is that even if Dr. Morrison's credentials are questionable, Mrs. Whitmore's own actions demonstrate impaired judgment. She's allowing squatters to occupy her property. She's making wild accusations about events that allegedly occurred decades ago. She's aligning herself with individuals seeking to profit from spurious claims against the family estate. Those individuals are my family." Rose's voice cut through the legal rhetoric. "Elena Hartley is my granddaughter. Iris is my great-granddaughter. They have more right to the Whitmore estate than Preston does because they actually care about its history and meaning. You can't prove that relationship." Preston spoke for the first time, his voice desperate. "They showed up out of nowhere with a convenient story. Probably found some old letters and concocted this whole DNA tests prove it." Patricia Hammond stood holding up documents. "We had testing done 3 days ago. Elena Hartley shares genetic markers with Rose Whitmore consistent with a great-granddaughter relationship. Which means Catherine Whitmore did have a child. Which means Preston knew about his sister and let her die alone. Which means everything he's told this court about his mother's mental state and his own motivations is a lie." The courtroom erupted. Judge Foster's gavel cracked like a gunshot order. "I will have order or I will clear this room." Silence fell gradually, reluctantly. The judge reviewed the DNA documentation, compared it against birth certificates and death records, built a timeline that matched what Catherine's letters had described. When she looked up, her expression had hardened. "Mr. Whitmore, did you have contact with your sister Catherine before her death in 1999? Preston's composure was completely gone now. His hands shook. His voice came out barely above a whisper. "Yes." "Did she ask you to help reconcile with your mother?" "Yes." "Did you agree to help?" "Yes. I meant to. But you chose not to, because it would affect your inheritance." The judge's voice was flat. "You let your sister die believing you would keep your promise, then spent the next 26 years hiding her existence from your mother. It wasn't like that." Preston was on his feet now, face red, words tumbling out. "Catherine left. She chose to leave. She chose to cut ties. I was 5 years old when she disappeared. What was I supposed to do? You were 24 when she asked for help." Elena stood now too, her voice ringing through the courthouse. "You were an adult, a lawyer, someone with resources and connections. You could have brought your sister home. Instead, you let her die alone and then tried to erase her from history by destroying the house where she hid the truth about your family." "I didn't." Preston looked around wildly, at the judge, at his lawyers, at the cameras capturing every moment. "I didn't set that fire." "But you wanted the house gone." Judge Foster's voice was ice. "You wanted any evidence of your family's land fraud destroyed. You wanted your sister's story silenced permanently." Preston's lawyers were urging him to sit down, to stop talking, but he was past hearing them. "You don't understand. That scandal would have destroyed us. Everyone my father and grandfather ever dealt with, every contract, every property transfer, every business relationship would have been questioned. The lawsuits would have bankrupted the family. I was trying to protect what was ours, what was stolen." Rose's voice carried despite her age and exhaustion. "Preston, your grandfather stole from 53 families. Catherine tried to return what he took. I stopped her. You stopped her. But the truth doesn't stay buried forever. It's out now, and you will face the consequences." Judge Foster let the silence stretch. Then she gathered her papers and spoke with the finality of someone ending a story that should have ended decades ago. "I'm revoking Preston Whitmore's power of attorney over Rose Whitmore's affairs, effective immediately. I'm ordering a criminal investigation into Dr. Morrison's evaluation and Preston Whitmore's potential witness tampering. I'm voiding the sale contract with Ashford Development pending resolution of property claims from the families documented in Catherine Whitmore's research, and I'm referring this case to the State Attorney General for review of potential land fraud dating back to 1920. She paused, her gaze sweeping across the courtroom. Catherine Whitmore spent her life trying to make right what her family made wrong. She deserves better than to have her story burned and buried. This court will ensure her evidence is preserved and her truth is told. The gavel fell. Preston sat like a man who'd been struck. Rose wept quietly, Iris holding her hand. Elena felt something loosen in her chest, not quite hope, not quite relief, but something adjacent to both. Outside, reporters mobbed them with questions. Patricia fielded most of them, her legal experience showing in how she framed the story. Inside, Frank was coordinating with the families who'd come forward, helping them file formal claims, building a case that would reshape how Montana understood its own past. Victoria Ashford appeared one final time as they were leaving, pulling Rose aside for a conversation the cameras couldn't hear. When Rose returned, her expression was unreadable. She agreed to fund the historical site. Full preservation of what's left of the house, plus construction of a museum dedicated to Catherine's life and the families her father defrauded. In exchange, we drop any suggestion that Ashford Development had anything to do with the fire. Do you believe she didn't? Elena kept her voice low. I believe she's smart enough to use proxies. Rose's smile was bitter. But I also believe Catherine would rather have her story told than revenge against people who can't be proven guilty. We take the win we can get. They drove back to what remained of the estate as sunset painted the ruins gold and crimson. The stone walls still stood skeletal but defiant. The evidence box sat in the back of Frank's truck, its contents intact despite everything fire had tried to claim. Iris walked through the ashes carefully, looking for anything salvageable. She found one letter half burned but readable, dated October 1998. Catherine's handwriting was shaky but determined. Mother, I'm dying. But I'm not afraid. Because I know that truth survives even when we don't. It continues in the people who seek it, the words we preserve, the courage we show in speaking what needs to be heard. You may never read this, but I trust that someday someone will, and they'll understand what I tried to do. Truth endures, even when everything else burns. The girl brought the letter to Rose. The old woman read it, tears cutting tracks through soot on her face. Then she folded it carefully and placed it in her pocket over her heart. Tomorrow they would start the legal process of restitution. Tomorrow reporters would dig deeper into the scandal. Tomorrow 53 families would begin the long journey toward justice. But tonight they stood in the ruins of a house that had kept secrets too long and let them finally escape. 6 months after the fire, construction crews broke ground on what remained of the Whitmore estate. Not demolition this time, but restoration. Careful, reverent work that honored what Catherine had loved about the place while making it functional for its new purpose. The stone walls were reinforced with steel and concrete. The roof was rebuilt using salvaged slate from barns across Montana. Windows were replaced with glass that matched the original wavy panes, imperfect and honest. Victoria Ashford's money funded it all, her company's logo conspicuously absent from any signage. The lawyers had negotiated that detail carefully. This wasn't corporate charity, but restitution, acknowledgement of harm, even if the harm couldn't be directly proven. The resort was going up 2 miles away on the parceled land, luxury cabins, and a spa that would bring tourism dollars to the region. But here on the 50 acres surrounding the ruined mansion, something different was emerging. Catherine's Haven. That's what Rose insisted on calling it. Not a museum, though one room would be dedicated to Catherine's life and the families her father had defrauded. Not a memorial, though memory lived in every restored stone. A shelter, a refuge, a place where women and children fleeing violence or poverty or despair could find safety and time to rebuild. Elena had fought the idea at first. Her voice carried exhaustion from 6 months of legal proceedings, family interviews, and the slow grind of turning scandal into justice. We're not social workers. We don't have training. We barely survived ourselves. But Rose had been immovable, her frailty belied by determination that felt like Catherine speaking through her. Then we learn. We hire people with training. We build something that would have saved my daughter if it had existed when she needed it. By early May 2025, the main structure was habitable. 8 bedrooms converted into private spaces for families. A commercial kitchen where residents could learn to cook for themselves and others. A library filled with books donated by people across Montana who'd followed the story. A childcare center where Iris spent her afternoons reading to toddlers whose mothers were interviewing for jobs or meeting with lawyers or simply sleeping for the first time in months. The letter wall took longest to complete. They'd recovered 178 of Catherine's letters, some from the house before it burned, others from people Catherine had sent them to, still more from archives where she'd deposited copies with instructions they be opened after her death. Elena had spent weeks arranging them chronologically, each one preserved behind UV protective glass, each one labeled with date and context. The wall itself stretched 20 feet high in what had been the estate's grand parlor. Walking its length was walking through Catherine's life. Her joy at discovering pregnancy, her terror at Rose's rejection, her determination to build a life for Lily, despite everything, her slow acceptance that acknowledgement might never come. Her final entries written in a hand that shook from cancer and morphine but never wavered in love. At the center, larger than the rest, hung the letter Catherine had written 2 months before dying, the one addressed to whoever finds this. Elena had read it so many times she could recite it from memory, but each reading still caught her throat. The words about fierce love, surviving silence, about homes waiting for those who needed them, about hope planted in walls until someone came to harvest it. The grand opening was scheduled for May 15th, 26 years to the day after Catherine's death. 200 people attended despite rain that turned the grounds into mud and made tent poles sink at drunken angles. The families whose land claims were being processed came with children and grandchildren. Reporters who'd covered the scandal came with cameras. Patricia Hammond came with a dozen other lawyers who'd joined the restitution cases pro bono. Preston didn't come. He was facing criminal charges for witness tampering and conspiracy to commit fraud. His law license had been suspended pending investigation. The family fortune that remained after settlement payments barely covered his legal fees. He'd sent a letter to Rose Elena, had seen it a single page of defensive justifications and half-hearted apologies that Rose had read once and burned without comment. Victoria Ashford came surprising everyone. She stood at the back during the ceremony, her expression unreadable as Rose spoke about Catherine's vision and the importance of providing refuge. When it ended, she approached Elena with an envelope. Inside is a check for operational funding, enough for 2 years if you're careful. After that, my company will match whatever you raise through other donors. This isn't charity. It's acknowledgement that some debts can't be fully repaid, but must be attempted anyway. Elena studied the woman who'd tried to bulldoze Catherine's legacy into oblivion, who'd backed down only when public pressure became unbearable, who was now offering money that would keep the haven running. Trust wasn't possible. But pragmatism was, we'll take it, and we'll name you as a donor publicly unless you'd prefer anonymity. Anonymity. Victoria's smile was thin. Some redemptions are better witnessed privately. Rose cut the ribbon with Iris beside her, the old woman's hands steady, despite tremors that had worsened over winter. Cameras flashed. Applause rippled through the crowd. The doors opened and people flooded into a space that had been dead for decades and now thrummed with purpose. Over the following weeks, families began arriving. A mother of 3 fleeing an abusive marriage, an elderly woman whose house had been foreclosed, a teenager pregnant and abandoned. Each one was given a room, a key, a promise that they could stay as long as needed while they rebuilt whatever had broken. Elena managed operations with the help of staff. They'd hired a social worker named Diana, who'd spent 20 years in the foster system, a chef named Marcus, who'd learned to cook in prison and wanted to teach others, a counselor named Sarah, who specialized in trauma and spoke 4 languages. They built routines, morning meetings where residents shared goals and concerns, evening meals prepared communally, childcare rotations, job training workshops, therapy sessions. Iris thrived in the chaos. She'd turned 10 in March, celebrated with a cake baked by Marcus and presents from women who'd become extended family. She helped new arrivals settle in, showing them where towels were kept and how the ancient plumbing required patience. She read to children in the library. She organized game nights and movie screenings using a projector Frank had donated. Rose watched it all from the second-floor apartment they'd built for her, too old to navigate stairs easily, but unwilling to live anywhere else. She spent mornings reading through Catherine's diary, afternoons writing responses in her own journal, as if the conversation could still happen across the barrier of death. Her health was declining visibly. The doctors had found cancer in February, aggressive and inoperable. She'd refused chemotherapy. I'm 79. I've lived long enough to see my daughter's vision realized. That's more than I deserve. But she stayed engaged, attending house meetings when strength allowed, advising Elena on decisions that felt too large, building a relationship with Iris that filled some of the void Catherine's absence had left. The girl would climb the stairs each evening with Rose's dinner tray, staying to talk about her day, listening to stories about Catherine as a child that Rose had never told anyone. One evening in late June, Rose handed Iris a key. This opens a safety deposit box at First National Bank. I've put you down as authorized. Inside are documents that belong to your family, birth certificates, photographs, some jewelry that was Catherine's. When I'm gone, make sure your mother gets them. Iris's face crumpled. You're not going anywhere. Child. Rose's voice was gentle. I'm going exactly where I need to go. To see Catherine and tell her in person what I should have said 40 years ago. But before I do, I want to make sure you understand something. What you are loved. Ferociously, completely, without condition. Your great-grandmother loved your grandmother that way. Your grandmother loved your mother that way. Your mother loves you that way. And I, Rose's voice caught, I love you that way too, even though I've only known you 7 months. That love is Catherine's greatest gift. It survives everything. Remember that. Iris climbed into Rose's lap despite being too big for it, and they sat together watching rain streak the windows while evening settled over the haven. The discovery happened on a Tuesday in July. Diana was organizing the intake office when she found a cardboard box shoved behind filing cabinets that had been moved during renovation. Inside were manila folders dated 2014 patient files from the brief period when a rural health clinic had operated on the property before closing for lack of funding. Among the generic medical records was a thinner folder labeled simply L. Hartley. Diana brought it to Elena. I think this might be your mother. The dates match. Elena opened it with hands that had started shaking. Inside were psychiatric evaluation forms, crisis counseling notes, medication prescriptions for depression and anxiety. All dated October through December 2014, the year before her mother Lily died. Patient presence with severe depression following rejection by estranged family. The counselor's notes were clinical, but compassion showed through. Reports attempting contact with biological grandmother Rose Whitmore. Contact was blocked by family attorney who stated grandmother was deceased. Patient became suicidal upon learning family wanted no relationship. The next page detailed treatment, antidepressants, weekly therapy, safety planning. Lily had been improving. The notes from late November showed cautious optimism. Then December 3rd, patient failed to attend scheduled appointment. Multiple attempts to contact unsuccessful. Closing file. The date of Lily's death was December 8, 2014. Car accident, the police had said. Lost control on a mountain road. No evidence of mechanical failure or weather conditions that would explain it. Elena had been 26, working 2 jobs, raising Iris alone. The grief had been sharp and complicated, tangled up with anger at a mother who'd never explained why they had no family, why she'd raised Elena in isolation. Now the explanation sat in Elena's hands. Lily had tried, had found Rose, had been turned away by Preston, who'd told her Rose was dead rather than admit the grandmother Lily sought was alive and being kept from her. Elena's vision tunneled. Her breathing went shallow. She felt Iris's hand on her arm, heard her daughter's voice from somewhere distant. Mom, what's wrong? She tried. Elena forced words through a throat that felt crushed. Your grandmother Lily tried to find Rose, tried to reconnect with family. And Preston, he lied to her, told her Rose was dead. And then Lily. The implication hung heavy. 5 days between the final therapy note and Lily's death. 5 days of believing her own mother had died without ever wanting to know her. 5 days before Lily drove her car off a mountain road with no witnesses and no clear reason except the kind of despair that made living feel impossible. Rose needed to know. Elena climbed the stairs on legs that felt boneless, the folder clutched against her chest. The old woman was in her chair by the window, writing in the journal that had become her constant companion. She looked up when Elena entered, immediately sensing something wrong. What happened? Lily found you. Elena's voice broke on the words. 10 years ago. She found this place. She tried to contact you. Preston told her you were dead. Rose's pen fell from fingers gone suddenly slack. Number. Please tell me you're lying. Elena handed over the folder. Watched Rose read through evaluations and notes and medication records. Watched understanding dawn, and then horror. And then something that looked like the final breaking of a heart that had been cracking for decades. She was here. Rose's whisper was barely audible. My granddaughter stood on this property, asked for me, was told I was dead. And I never knew. I could have saved her. You didn't know Preston was lying, but I gave him the power to lie. Rose's hands crumpled the folder. I made him executor. I let him control access to me. I chose comfort over engagement, and my granddaughter died thinking no one wanted her, the same way Catherine died. Yes. Rose met Elena's eyes, her own swimming with tears. 3 generations of women who loved fiercely and asked for nothing but acknowledgement in return. And 3 times the Whitmore pride destroyed them. Not 3 times. Elena knelt beside Rose's chair. I'm still here. Iris is still here. We found you. We got the acknowledgement Catherine and Lily deserved. The pattern is broken. But the cost. Rose's voice cracked. The cost was Catherine dying alone, Lily dying in despair. You suffering a childhood without family because I was too proud to stop. Elena gripped Rose's hands, felt how fragile they'd become, how close to breaking. You can't carry guilt for things you didn't know. You can't rewrite time. You can only choose what to do with the time you have left. I'm dying. The blunt statement hung between them. The cancer is spreading. I have weeks, maybe a month. Then don't waste them on regret. Use them to be what Catherine and Lily never had. Be a great-grandmother to Iris. Be a mother to me if that's not too strange to say. Help us build something that makes sure what happened to them never happens to anyone else. Rose pulled Elena into an embrace that felt like absolution. They stayed that way while sun moved across the floor and residents laughed somewhere below, and the house that had witnessed so much grief slowly learned what healing sounded like. The truth about Lily's death came out incrementally. Patricia filed a wrongful death claim against Preston's estate, alleging his lies had directly contributed to Lily's suicide. Preston's lawyers fought it, but the medical records were damning. A settlement was eventually reached, money that went directly into Catherine's Haven's endowment, turning what Preston had tried to hide into permanent funding for the work Catherine had envisioned. August brought heat that made the old house's bones creak and residents retreat to shaded porches. Rose's decline accelerated. She stopped coming downstairs, stopped eating much, spent most of her time sleeping or writing letters to Catherine that would never be sent, except through whatever channels exist between the living and the dead. Iris read to her in the evenings fairy tales at first, then books Rose requested. The Secret Garden about a girl who finds life in a place everyone thought was dead. Little Women about sisters who love each other through hardship and war. Anne of Green Gables about an orphan who talks too much and loves too fiercely and finds family anyway. One evening in late August, Rose asked Iris to bring her a specific box from the closet. Inside was a metal container, fireproof, identical to the one that had held Catherine's fraud evidence. But this one was smaller, newer. I found something last month. Rose's voice was weak. Something I'd missed all these years. Inside the metal box was a single letter. The envelope read, Letter 200. To my granddaughter, if she exists. The paper was yellowed but intact, the handwriting Catherine's. Rose's hands trembled as she gave it to Elena, who'd come upstairs when Iris called her. I wanted to wait. To give this to you at the right time. I think before I die is the right time. Elena opened it with reverence. Iris pressed against her side, reading along. My dear unknown granddaughter Catherine had written in January 1999, 4 months before her death. I'm writing this in the middle of the night because pain won't let me sleep, and I want to use these wakeful hours for something meaningful. I don't know if you exist. Lily is only 14. She might never have children, might choose a different path, might break the cycle of abandonment that defined my relationship with my mother. But if you do exist, and if somehow you find this house, then you need to know certain truths. First, you come from love. Your grandmother Lily was loved with every fiber of my being. I may have failed at many things, but I never failed at loving her. She will love you the same way. We are women who love fiercely and ask for nothing but acknowledgement in return. Don't let anyone convince you that's weakness. It's the strongest thing we do. Second, this house remembers. I've poured 20 years of letters into its walls. Every hiding place is a message saying, I was here, I mattered, I loved. If you find them, you'll know your family's whole story, not just the pretty parts but the painful ones, the choices that broke us, the pride that kept us apart, the scandal we tried to hide. Don't hide from that truth. Learn from it. Third, forgiveness doesn't erase harm, but it prevents that harm from spreading. I forgave my mother years ago for rejecting me, but I never forgot how much it hurt. How many nights I cried myself to sleep wondering what I'd done to deserve exile. How many times I almost gave up. That pain shaped me, made me more compassionate, made me determined that Lily would never question whether she was wanted. Choose what you carry forward carefully. Anger and bitterness, or compassion and grace. Fourth, if you're reading this, you found your way home. This house was waiting for you. It will shelter you if you need shelter. It will heal you if you need healing. It will show you that even broken things can be made whole again, not perfect, but purposeful. I won't live to meet you, but I'm leaving pieces of myself scattered through these walls. In letters, in the garden I planted, in the truth I fought to expose, in the determination that love survives even when we don't. You are the inheritor of all that. Use it well. Build something that honors not just me but every woman who came before you, every woman who fought alone, every woman who loved fiercely despite being taught that fierce love was unladylike, every woman who told the truth when silence would have been safer. You are not alone. You were never alone. We're all here in these walls, in these words, in the blood and breath that made you. Welcome home, my darling. Welcome home. With infinite love, Catherine Whitmore. Elena read it 3 times before her vision cleared enough to see properly. Iris was crying quietly beside her. Rose watched them both, her own tears silent. She knew. Rose's voice was barely audible. Catherine knew someone would come, knew love would survive long enough to bring her family home. She had more faith than I ever did. She had faith because you taught her to have it. Elena looked at Rose. Before you broke her heart, you gave her a childhood full of love. You planted roses together. You taught her to hope. That's why she could keep hoping even when you stopped answering, because she remembered what you'd been before pride poisoned you. Rose nodded slowly. Then I want to leave something too. Something for whoever comes after you. After Iris. After all of us. She pulled out the journal she'd been writing in for months. I've written Catherine everything I should have said. Every apology, every expression of love, every acknowledgement of her courage and my cowardice. When I die, I want this displayed with her letters. I want everyone who reads her words to know that I finally heard them, that I answered, that even if the answer came 40 years too late, it came with all the love I should have shown her when she was alive. We'll make sure of it, Elena promised. 3 days later, Rose slipped into unconsciousness. Hospice had been coming daily, managing pain, preparing Elena for what was inevitable. They'd set up a bed in Rose's apartment, medical equipment that beeped and hummed through quiet hours. Elena and Iris kept vigil. Frank visited daily. Diana brought meals they barely touched. The residents of the Haven created a rotation, someone always sitting with Rose, reading aloud or playing quiet music or simply being present, so she wouldn't die alone the way Catherine had. On September 7th, just after dawn, Rose's breathing changed. The hospice nurse had warned them about this, the rattle, the long pauses between breaths, the sense of a body preparing for final departure. Iris held one of Rose's hands. Elena held the other. Around them the house was waking, coffee brewing, children laughing, the ordinary sounds of life continuing. Rose's eyes opened. Clarity flickered there, briefly recognition of where she was and who held her. Her lips moved soundlessly at first, then Catherine. I see her. She's here. Elena couldn't see anything except an old woman dying in clean sheets with people who loved her nearby. But she said anyway, tell her we found the letters. Tell her the truth came out. Tell her Lily's daughter came home. She knows. Rose's smile was beatific. She says she's been here all along. In every letter, every truth spoken, every hand extended in kindness. Love doesn't end. It just changes form. The next breath didn't come. The spaces between heartbeats stretched. Iris was crying quietly. Elena held Rose's hand and felt the warmth leave it slowly, degree by degree, until what remained was just a body, and Rose was somewhere else. The hospice nurse checked vital signs with professional gentleness. She's gone. I'm very sorry for your loss. But Elena didn't feel loss exactly. Felt grief, yes. Felt the absence of someone who'd become family in the brief time they'd known each other, but also felt something like completion. Rose had found her daughter again, if only in the moments before death. Had been given the chance. Catherine never got to die surrounded by family. Knowing her story mattered, understanding that love had survived even when she'd tried very hard to kill it. They buried Rose beside Catherine 3 days later. The graves were in the garden behind the Haven, marked with simple stones. Rose's read Rose Whitmore, 1946 to 2025. Beloved mother of Catherine. Beloved great-grandmother of Elena and Iris. Love survives even the longest silence. During the service, Iris read the letter Rose had written to Catherine, the one she'd kept private all these months, finishing it just days before the cancer claimed her capacity for words. My darling daughter, I wasted 40 years. 40 years I could have known you, supported you, helped you raise Lily. 40 years I spent protecting pride that meant nothing and losing love that meant everything. I can't apologize enough. Can't make it right. Can't bring back the time we lost. But I want you to know I never stopped loving you. Even when I pretended you were dead, even when I threw away your letters unread, even when I chose reputation over relationship. I loved you. I just didn't know how to show it. I was raised to believe showing need was weakness. Asking forgiveness was failure. I taught myself that strength meant bearing everything alone. I was wrong. Strength is reaching out, asking for help, admitting when you've broken something precious. You tried to teach me that in every letter you sent. I finally learned. Too late for us. But not too late for Elena and Iris. They found me. They gave me a chance to be the grandmother and great-grandmother I should have been for you and Lily. They let me help build the refuge you dreamed of creating. They showed me what unconditional love looks like. I'm coming to you now. I hope you can forgive me. I hope we'll have time, all the time we missed on Earth, to talk and cry and laugh and rebuild what I destroyed. Thank you for never giving up on me. Thank you for leaving letters that brought your granddaughter home. Thank you for loving Lily so completely that she could love Elena the same way. Thank you for being braver than I ever was. I love you. I'm sorry. I'm coming home. Mother. 200 people attended the funeral. Some knew Rose personally. Others knew only Catherine's story and wanted to witness its conclusion. The Haven's residents came as a group, mothers and children who'd found safety in something Rose had helped create. After the service, after the reception, after the last visitors had left, Elena and Iris walked through the garden alone. The autumn air smelled of rain coming. Leaves were starting to turn gold and crimson against the green that still held. "Do you think they're together now?" Iris asked the question that had been sitting between them. Gran, Rose, and Catherine. "I think if there's anything after death, if consciousness continues in any form, then yes, they're together." Elena believed it more than she'd expected to, having the conversation they should have had 50 years ago. Iris was quiet for a moment. Then, "Mom, are we going to stay here? Run the Haven? Do you want to?" "Yeah. This feels like home. The only real home I've ever had." Elena pulled her daughter close. "Then we stay. We keep building what Catherine started and Rose helped restore. We make sure their story matters." 2 years passed. Catherine's Haven became a fixture in Montana's landscape, both physical and cultural. The story had spread through national media: the homeless woman who found her family's abandoned mansion, the letters hidden in walls, the land fraud exposed, the great-grandmother's redemption. Documentary crews filmed, journalists wrote long-form pieces. The Haven appeared in textbooks as an example of historical injustice being addressed through community organizing. By the summer of 2027, the Haven had served 324 women and children. 89% found stable housing. 73% gained employment or education that improved their prospects. The numbers mattered to funders and board members. But what mattered to Elena were the stories behind them. Like Maria, who arrived with 3 children and a restraining order that might not hold. Who learned to code through the Haven's partnership with a tech training program. Who got a remote job that paid enough for a small apartment in town. Who brought her kids back to volunteer on weekends. Like Sandra, 68 years old, who'd lost her house when her husband died and medical bills consumed their savings. Who'd been living in her car when hypothermia brought her to the emergency room and a social worker mentioned the Haven. Who now ran the library and taught literacy classes and told everyone who'd listen that being homeless wasn't a moral failure. Like Destiny, 17 and pregnant, kicked out by parents who called her a disgrace. Who gave birth at the local hospital with Elena and Iris in the delivery room because she had no one else. Who named her daughter Hope because that's what the Haven had given her. Frank had become the Haven's unofficial maintenance director, fixing pipes and electrical issues and mysterious leaks with the patience of someone who'd spent a lifetime making broken things work. He and Elena had married quietly the previous spring, a small ceremony in the garden with Iris as maid of honor and residents providing the food. The transformation still surprised Elena sometimes. 3 years ago she'd been dying in a blizzard with no prospects and no family. Now she had both. Now she ran an organization that mattered. Now she was building the kind of safety net that might have saved Catherine, might have saved Lily, might have changed everything. Iris was 13 now, tall and serious, studying social work concepts through online courses while helping manage the Haven's daily operations. She'd taken ownership of the letter wall, giving tours to visitors, explaining Catherine's life with the passion of someone who'd never met her great-great-grandmother, but felt her presence everywhere. On warm evenings, Elena would sit in the garden between the 2 graves, Catherine's and Rose's, side by side, as they should have been in life. She'd bring the letters she was currently reading. They'd recovered all but 4 of the original 200, the rest lost to fire or time. She'd read them aloud as if the women buried there could still hear, still learn, still grow from the truth they'd been too damaged to speak while alive. The Haven had expanded. 2 new wings were under construction, funded by a combination of Victoria Ashford's continued contributions, anonymous as she'd requested, and a state grant for women's services. When complete, they'd be able to house 20 families simultaneously. The land restitution cases had mostly settled. Of the 53 families Catherine had documented, 47 received either land returned or financial compensation. The process had been slower than anyone wanted, but faster than anyone expected, driven by public pressure and the undeniable evidence Catherine had preserved. Preston had served 18 months for fraud and witness tampering. He'd been released 3 months ago, reportedly working as a paralegal in Spokane, disbarred and diminished but alive. Rose had left him 10% of her estate in her final will, not because he deserved it. Her executor's notes explained, but because Catherine would have wanted mercy to temper justice. Victoria Ashford's resort had opened the previous fall. Luxury cabins, a spa, hiking trails through preserved wilderness. The reviews were excellent. The money flowed, and true to the settlement agreement 5% of gross profits went to Catherine's haven in perpetuity. Victoria had never visited the haven itself. Some redemptions, as she'd said, were better witnessed privately. The letter wall had become a pilgrimage site. People drove from across the country to read Catherine's words to see what love looked like when it refused to die despite every reason to give up. The museum room displayed not just letters, but artifacts. Catherine's diary, the fraud evidence, photographs of the families helped Rose's response journal, even the metal box that had survived the fire. At the center of the display, in a climate-controlled case, sat letter 200, Catherine's message to her unknown granddaughter. Next to it, in a matching case, Rose's final journal entry, "I learned too late that love written down never dies. It waits to be found, to be read, to transform whoever discovers it. Catherine, my daughter, thank you for waiting. Thank you for teaching me that some silences can be broken even after 40 years. On the 3rd anniversary of finding the house, late November 2027, the Haven held a celebration. Not the public grand opening of years past, but something quieter. Current and former residents gathered, staff who'd built the program from nothing, families who'd received land restitution, Frank and Patricia and Diana and Marcus and all the others whose lives had intersected with Catherine's story. Iris, now confident in ways that still startled Elena, stood before the group. 3 years ago, my mom and I were freezing to death in a car. We had nothing. We were nothing. Then we found this house. And in finding it, we found everything. We found family. We found purpose. We found proof that love survives anything if someone's brave enough to write it down and trust that eventually the right person will read it." She gestured to the letter wall. The 200 voices speaking across decades. Catherine Whitmore never met me, never met my mom, never knew we existed. But she loved us anyway. She left us instructions on how to live, how to forgive, how to build something that honors the past while creating a different future. Iris pulled an envelope from her pocket. "I wrote my own letter, not to hide it, but to share it. Because I learned from Catherine that writing things down makes them real, makes them survive." She read, "To whoever comes after me, after my mom, after everyone here today, if you find yourself lost, if you find yourself alone, if you find yourself convinced that no one cares whether you live or die, I want you to know something. You matter. Your story matters. The love you carry matters, even if no one seems to see it right now. This house exists because one woman refused to let love die even when everyone told her it was pointless. This haven exists because my great-grandmother Catherine believed truth was worth pursuing even when it cost her everything. These families are whole because my great-great-grandmother Rose finally learned that pride is just fear in expensive clothing. Don't wait 40 years to say what needs to be said. Don't hide your truth in walls. Speak it, write it, share it. Trust that love finds its way. Always. Welcome home. Iris Hartley, November 2027. The applause was soft but sustained. Elena felt tears on her face and didn't bother wiping them away. Frank squeezed her hand. Around them, the house rebuilt from ruins filled with life, warm in every sense, held space for all of them. That night, after everyone had left or gone to bed, Elena walked through the quiet halls, past the letter wall glowing under subtle lighting, past the bedrooms where 8 families slept safely, past the library where tomorrow someone would learn to read, past the kitchen where next week someone would learn to cook their first meal without fear. She ended in the garden as she often did. The graves were simple, marked with stones that bore truth instead of platitude. Catherine's read Catherine Whitmore, 1961 to 1999. She loved fiercely and spoke truth bravely. Her words brought us home. Roses beside it. Rose Whitmore, 1946 to 2025. She learned that love survives even the longest silence. Elena sat between them on the bench Frank had built. The night was clear, stars sharp as ice above Montana's wide sky. Somewhere in the house someone laughed. Somewhere a child cried and was comforted. Somewhere a woman slept without fear for the first time in months. 4 generations of women had been broken by silence and saved by words. Catherine writing letters no one would read for decades. Lily trying to find family and being turned away. Rose learning too late that pride was a prison. And now Elena and Iris inheriting both the trauma and the triumph, choosing to build something that meant the pattern wouldn't repeat. The longest distance between 2 people might be silence, but love written down and waiting could cross any distance, could survive fire and time and the death of everyone who'd first felt it, could become the foundation for something larger than any single story. Catherine's haven would continue, would grow, would shelter and heal and transform, would be the answer Catherine had imagined but never lived to see realized, would be Rose's redemption and Lily's memorial and Elena's purpose and Iris's inheritance. And somewhere in the space between what had been and what would be, between the letters hidden and the letters found, between the grief that had defined them and the grace that would carry them forward, 4 generations of women finally came home. Elena stood, touched each gravestone gently, and walked back toward the house. Light glowed in every window. Smoke rose from the chimney. Inside waited warmth and purpose and family, built not from blood alone, but from the conscious choice to love when love seemed impossible. The door opened easily under her hand. The house welcomed her with familiar sounds, creaking floorboards, humming radiators, distant voices. Not frozen anymore, not abandoned, not holding secrets in its walls, but holding people in its shelter. She was home. They all were. Finally.